Section 1. The immediate impact on climate and atmosphere. The first consequence of the Amazon's disappearance would be a rapid disruption to local and regional climate. The rainforest, often described as a climate engine, plays a central role in generating rainfall across South America. Through evapotranspiration, trees release water vapor that rises into the atmosphere, forming clouds that eventually produce precipitation. This process is responsible for feeding the Amazon River and influencing rainfall as far away as Argentina, the United States, and even parts of Africa through atmospheric teleconnections. Without this forest, rainfall patterns would shift dramatically, creating extended droughts and increased desertification in regions that rely on consistent moisture. Temperatures would rise significantly across South America. The dense canopy of the rainforest functions like a natural air conditioner, absorbing sunlight and releasing water that cools the surrounding environment. Without this shading and evaporative cooling, surface temperatures would increase by several degrees, altering the growing conditions for crops and creating heat stress for animals and humans alike. This warming effect would not remain local. Higher temperatures in the Amazon basin would contribute to larger atmospheric circulation changes, influencing the jet streams and shifting weather patterns across the hemisphere. Atmospheric carbon levels would spike almost immediately. The Amazon is a massive carbon sink, storing billions of tons of carbon in trees, soils, and undergrowth. When the forest disappears, much of this carbon would be released into the atmosphere, further amplifying the greenhouse effect. This feedback loop could accelerate global warming, intensifying storms, melting polar ice, and increasing sea levels. Even distant nations would feel the consequences, illustrating the profound global interdependence tied to the rainforest's presence. Air quality would decline in both regional and global contexts. Trees filter particulate matter, absorb pollutants, and produce oxygen that sustains all aerobic life. The loss of billions of trees in the Amazon would reduce the planet's capacity to clean the air, contributing to smog, respiratory illnesses, and ecological stress in nearby urban and rural areas. Cities that currently benefit from wind-blown air purification from forested regions would experience heightened pollution and related health challenges. Microclimates would disappear almost overnight. Within the rainforest, the interplay of canopy layers, understory vegetation, and dense leaf litter creates localized cooling zones, humid pockets, and shade refuges for plants and animals. These microclimates maintain delicate temperature and moisture balances critical for sensitive species. Their sudden removal would leave the landscape exposed to harsh sunlight, wind, and precipitation extremes, rapidly transforming the habitat and reducing its ability to support diverse life. The feedback on regional rivers and hydrological systems would be immediate. The Amazon River, which carries about 20% of the planet's freshwater discharge into the oceans, depends on the forest to regulate its flow. Trees absorb and redistribute water, and rainfall generated by the forest contributes to consistent river levels. Without the forest, river flows would become erratic, with seasonal floods turning into destructive torrents and dry seasons leaving stretches of riverbed exposed. This instability would affect freshwater availability, aquatic ecosystems, and communities that rely on rivers for food, transport, and livelihoods. Atmospheric humidity patterns would also shift. Rainforests maintain high moisture levels through transpiration, and this humidity influences regional cloud formation and rainfall cycles. Without the Amazon, dry air masses would dominate, leading to hotter, drier conditions that promote forest fires, soil degradation, and biodiversity loss. The cumulative effect of reduced rainfall, elevated temperatures, and declining humidity could transform vast areas into savanna or grassland over time, permanently altering South America's landscape. Beyond climate and hydrology, the sudden disappearance of the Amazon would impact global weather systems in more subtle ways. Tropical forests release volatile organic compounds, VOCs, into the atmosphere, which participate in cloud formation and influence precipitation far from the forest itself. Without these emissions, cloud dynamics would shift, affecting not only rainfall, but also sunlight reflection, atmospheric chemistry, and storm patterns on other continents. Even small-scale weather patterns would feel the difference. Afternoon storms, localized showers, and humid airflows that currently nurture agriculture in Brazil, Peru, and surrounding countries could diminish or disappear. Crop yields would drop, natural vegetation would struggle, and human food security would face unprecedented challenges. The Amazon is not simply a forest. It is a regulator of water and temperature cycles, an invisible hand that stabilizes weather both near and far. In essence, the disappearance of the Amazon would trigger a domino effect that begins with local climate disruption, but quickly spreads to regional, continental, and global scales. Temperatures would rise, rainfall would decline, rivers would become erratic, carbon levels would spike, and atmospheric chemistry would shift. The forest's absence would be felt in every raindrop, every breeze, and every weather event across South America and beyond. The Amazon is more than a collection of trees. It is a complex, dynamic system that maintains the balance of life, climate, and atmospheric health. Its sudden loss would be a profound shock to Earth's environmental equilibrium, a reminder that ecosystems, no matter how distant or vast, are deeply interconnected with our lives and the planet's future. Section 2. The Vanishing Web of Life. how species would respond to the Amazon's disappearance. The Amazon rainforest is often called the world's greatest living laboratory, a dense network of life where each organism, from the smallest insect to the largest predator, is connected in a delicate web of interdependence. To imagine the sudden disappearance of this vast forest is to imagine the unraveling of a complex tapestry, where every thread that sustains life is threatened, and where the ripple effects extend far beyond the Amazon itself. At the center of this crisis would be the immense diversity of species that rely on the rainforest's layered habitat. There are over 16,000 tree species, countless vines, epiphytes, and fungi, and hundreds of thousands of animals, from colorful macaws and dart frogs to jaguars, tapirs, and countless insects. Many of these species are specialists, finely adapted to the unique conditions the rainforest provides. Specific humidity levels, dense canopy cover, nutrient-rich soil, and the intricate microclimates within the forest's understory. Without the Amazon, these species would face immediate existential threats. Some creatures could attempt to migrate to neighboring habitats, but for many, suitable alternatives simply do not exist. Specialist birds that rely on certain tree species for nesting, or amphibians whose life cycles depend on consistent humidity and water quality, would struggle to survive. Even mobile predators like jaguars, which roam vast territories, would find their hunting grounds destroyed, prey populations collapsing around them. For less mobile organisms, extinction could occur within months or even weeks. The loss of the forest would also destroy critical breeding and feeding grounds. Amphibians and reptiles, which often lay eggs in specific puddles or tree cavities, would find these sites gone, halting reproduction. Pollinators, such as bees, hummingbirds, and bats, would lose both food sources and nesting locations, leading to cascading effects for flowering plants that rely on them. Insects, which form the backbone of many food chains, would vanish in unprecedented numbers, further destabilizing predator populations. The disappearance of the Amazon would also disrupt predator-prey relationships in profound ways. Herbivores dependent on specific plants would starve, and the carnivores that feed on them would follow. Population declines would not be uniform. Some species might survive in pockets, while others would vanish entirely. This selective survival would permanently alter the evolutionary trajectories of countless organisms. Over time, Earth's biodiversity would be less varied, less resilient, and far less capable of adapting to future environmental challenges. Fungi, often overlooked but critical to ecosystem function, would also suffer. Mycorrhizal networks, which connect plant roots and facilitate nutrient exchange, would collapse. These fungal networks not only support the trees themselves, but maintain soil health and carbon storage. Without the rainforest's trees, these networks would disintegrate, accelerating soil degradation and further impeding the recovery of vegetation. The disappearance of fungi would be a silent catastrophe, undermining life both above and below ground. Aquatic ecosystems within the Amazon basin would not be spared. Fish, amphibians, and invertebrates rely on the forest for shade, nutrients, and shelter along rivers and streams. The forest's disappearance would alter water temperatures, reduce the input of leaf litter that fuels aquatic food webs, and destabilize riverbanks. Many species could face local or complete extinction, and entire freshwater ecosystems could collapse, removing essential resources for human communities downstream. Even migratory species would feel the loss of the Amazon. Birds that travel thousands of kilometers rely on the forest as a stopover or wintering site. Without it, these species would face increased mortality due to lack of food and shelter, affecting ecosystems thousands of kilometers away. The disappearance of the rainforest would, in essence, reverberate across continents, altering the survival of species far beyond its boundaries. Beyond direct extinction, the Amazon's disappearance would impede the natural processes that maintain evolutionary diversity. The rainforest is a crucible for life, generating new species at astonishing rates due to its complex structure, microhabitats, and resource availability. Without it, speciation would slow dramatically, and Earth would lose one of its most important engines of biodiversity. Evolutionary potential, the raw capacity of life to adapt to future challenges, would be diminished. Even humans would feel the consequences of this ecological collapse. Many medicines are derived from plants and animals that reside in the Amazon, some of which are not yet known to science. Their loss would close the door on future discoveries that could save lives. The loss of pollinators, which maintain both wild and agricultural plants, would threaten food security. Furthermore, the ecological knowledge of indigenous peoples, honed over centuries of living within the forest, would be irrevocably disrupted. The disappearance of species is intertwined with the disappearance of knowledge, a dual loss that extends far beyond the ecological realm. Interestingly, the loss of the Amazon would also create feedback loops that exacerbate extinction risks elsewhere. As the rainforest vanishes, local and regional climate shifts would create harsher conditions in neighboring ecosystems. Drier savannas, altered wetlands, and shrinking rivers would become inhospitable for species that might have otherwise survived, triggering secondary waves of biodiversity loss. The Amazon, in effect, is not an isolated patch of greenery. It is a stabilizing influence on the entire continent's life. Yet, even amid this hypothetical catastrophe, the story of life reminds us of resilience. Some species may adapt to changing conditions, migrate, or survive in human-modified habitats. But the overall diversity and complexity of life would be irrevocably diminished. The Amazon's disappearance is not just a loss of space, it is a loss of possibility, a contraction of the living richness that sustains Earth. The forest species are interwoven with one another in countless ways, forming a network so intricate that removing it would be akin to yanking out a cornerstone of Earth's ecological architecture. The disappearance of one species would affect dozens more, creating an intricate cascade of effects that would ripple outward in unexpected ways. Every insect, bird, plant, and microorganism contributes to a system that regulates air, water, soil, and climate. Remove the forest, and that system falters. In sum, the Amazon rainforest is not merely a collection of trees and animals. It is a dynamic, interdependent web of life that sustains itself and, by extension, life across the globe. Its disappearance would not be a simple vacancy on a map. It would be a profound ecological rupture, reshaping the biosphere, reducing resilience, and altering evolutionary trajectories for millennia. The rainforest's biodiversity is both its wealth and its strength. It demonstrates that life, in all its forms, is interconnected, that species depend on one another for survival, and that the loss of a single habitat can reverberate across continents and oceans. The Amazon is Earth's living library, a testament to what is possible when life is allowed to flourish in abundance and complexity. Its loss would be a sobering reminder of the delicate balance that sustains our planet. Section 3: Carbon, Climate, and the Ripple Effects of Losing the Amazon. The Amazon rainforest is often called the lungs of the planet, and for good reason. It stores vast amounts of carbon, roughly 100 billion metric tons, within its trees, plants, and soils. This immense carbon reservoir plays a central role in regulating Earth's climate by sequestering greenhouse gases that would otherwise accumulate in the atmosphere. To imagine the disappearance of the Amazon is to envision a sudden, unprecedented release of this carbon, with consequences reverberating across the globe. When forests vanish, much of the carbon stored in their biomass is released into the atmosphere. Trees, which have grown over decades or centuries, contain carbon that was captured from the air through photosynthesis. The abrupt removal of the Amazon, whether through deforestation, fire, or fallout, or hypothetical disappearance, would release billions of tons of carbon dioxide almost instantaneously. Such a release would act like opening a faucet in the global carbon cycle, drastically accelerating greenhouse gas accumulation and intensifying the warming of the planet. This carbon surge would interact with other natural feedback mechanisms in ways that are difficult to fully predict. For instance, as temperatures rise, permafrost in the Arctic could thaw, releasing additional carbon and methane, while soils in other forests may lose their stored carbon due to drying and decomposition. The loss of the Amazon could therefore trigger a cascade of climate effects, amplifying warming on a scale that would affect continents far beyond South America. The immediate effect on atmospheric temperatures would be most evident in the tropics. Without the shading, cooling, and evapotranspiration provided by the rainforest, local regions would warm significantly. The dense canopy of the Amazon currently moderates surface heat, creating a microclimate that tempers temperature extremes. Its disappearance would remove this natural air conditioning, exposing the land to direct sunlight and creating hotter, drier conditions that would, in turn, promote desertification in certain areas. The hydrological cycle would also be altered in profound ways. Trees in the Amazon release immense volumes of water into the atmosphere each day, fueling cloud formation and regional rainfall. This flying river effect delivers water to agricultural regions, replenishes rivers, and maintains the delicate balance of precipitation across South America. Without the forest, rain patterns would shift, leading to prolonged droughts in some areas and increased flooding in others as storms become more erratic. The Amazon's disappearance would not just affect South America. Atmospheric changes could influence weather systems in North America, Africa, and even parts of Asia through complex climate interactions. Sea levels could also feel the indirect effects of losing the Amazon. Higher global temperatures from carbon release would accelerate the melting of glaciers and polar ice caps. Rising seas would threaten coastal communities worldwide, disrupt ocean currents, and amplify storm surges. While the forest does not physically control sea levels, its role as a carbon sink is vital in slowing the pace of warming that drives these changes. The Amazon also plays a role in controlling atmospheric composition beyond carbon dioxide. Trees emit volatile organic compounds, VOCs, which contribute to cloud condensation nuclei, assisting in cloud formation and precipitation. Without these emissions, cloud cover would decrease, allowing more sunlight to reach the Earth's surface and further heating the planet. The interplay between forest emissions, cloud formation, and solar radiation is delicate, and the loss of the Amazon would destabilize it, contributing to increased global temperatures and shifting weather patterns. Even soil carbon would be affected. The Amazon soils are rich in organic matter, storing carbon that has accumulated over millennia. Once the trees are gone, decomposition and erosion accelerate, releasing this stored carbon and reducing the fertility of the land. This makes it difficult for the forest or any vegetation to recover naturally, locking the region into a cycle of degradation. The loss of soil carbon is particularly important because it underpins both plant growth and the overall resilience of ecosystems, making the forest's disappearance even more consequential. Climate feedback loops would amplify the effects. For instance, as the region becomes drier, wildfires would become more frequent and intense, Fires release additional carbon into the atmosphere, destroy vegetation, and prevent regrowth. Each season without the Amazon would leave the land hotter, drier, and less capable of supporting life. The interactions between forest loss, fire, and carbon release illustrate a self-reinforcing cycle that could accelerate climate change globally. The disappearance of the Amazon would also impact global agriculture indirectly. Many crops depend on predictable rainfall and moderate temperatures. As atmospheric circulation patterns shift, regions that currently grow staples like soy, coffee, and maize could experience droughts or erratic precipitation. Reduced food security would not be limited to South America. Global trade networks would feel the effects, raising prices and potentially creating food scarcity in distant nations. Finally, the psychological and cultural impacts of losing the Amazon's carbon stabilizing effects should not be underestimated. While abstract, understanding that the forest functions as a planetary thermostat influences how humans perceive climate risk. The disappearance of this ecosystem would not only destabilize Earth's physical systems, but also alter humanity's sense of security and our relationship with the natural world. In sum, the Amazon rainforest is a linchpin in the global carbon cycle, a regulator of temperature and precipitation, and a key participant in climate stability. Its disappearance would be a climate shock of unprecedented magnitude, releasing billions of tons of carbon, altering rainfall patterns, destabilizing ecosystems, and amplifying warming in a chain reaction felt around the world. The forest is not merely a collection of trees. It is a vast, living system that maintains the delicate balance of Earth's climate, ensuring conditions suitable for life both locally and globally. The Amazon teaches us that ecosystems function on scales far beyond human perception. Carbon storage, water cycling, and atmospheric regulation occur simultaneously, invisibly, yet their effects touch every corner of the planet. Losing this forest would reveal the true scale of interconnection, showing that local ecosystems can have planetary consequences, and that life on Earth is sustained by networks both visible and hidden, delicate yet powerful. Section 4. The Earth Beneath Our Feet, Soil, Nutrients, and the Silent Collapse. Beneath the dense canopy of the Amazon lies another world, one just as vital, just as alive, though often overlooked, the soil. It is a living, breathing ecosystem in its own right, a delicate network of nutrients, microbes, fungi, and decomposing matter that sustains the forest above. To imagine the Amazon disappearing is to imagine this complex subterranean world collapsing, with consequences that ripple across ecosystems, agriculture, and the very foundation of life on Earth. Amazonian soils are rich not because of vast mineral deposits, but because of the constant recycling of organic matter within the forest. Leaves fall, branches decay, and animals leave behind waste, all of it transformed by billions of microorganisms into nutrients that feed new life. This continuous process ensures that the forest can sustain itself, even though the soils are, in many places, surprisingly shallow. The forest is a symbiotic partner with its soil. The soil provides nutrients. The forest provides shelter, water, and organic matter in return. Without the trees and plants of the Amazon, this nutrient cycle would collapse. Leaf litter would vanish, roots would no longer stabilize the ground, and microbial communities dependent on organic input would starve or disappear. Decomposition rates would slow dramatically, leaving the soil barren and incapable of supporting new vegetation. In the absence of roots and canopy cover, erosion would accelerate. Heavy rains, once absorbed and filtered by forest soils, would wash nutrients into rivers, leaving the land infertile. Within decades, areas once teeming with life could become degraded landscapes, reminiscent of savannas or deserts. This breakdown of the nutrient cycle would have a direct impact on agriculture. Fertile lands that depend on nearby forests for nutrient deposition through wind and water would suffer. Crops in surrounding regions, from Brazil's coffee plantations to Argentina's soy fields, would face reduced yields as soil fertility declined. Farmers might resort to artificial fertilizers, but these solutions are temporary and cannot replicate the complex chemistry created over millennia by forest ecosystems. The loss of natural nutrient recycling is effectively the loss of Earth's most sophisticated, self-sustaining fertilizer system. The disappearance of the Amazon would also disrupt the carbon stored in the soil. While trees hold much of the forest's carbon above ground, soils lock away vast quantities underground. When the forest is gone, soils dry out and decompose more rapidly, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This silent yet massive release would amplify global warming, reinforcing the climate shocks already triggered by forest loss. What happens beneath the soil, unseen and quiet, thus directly influences the global climate. Fungi, another critical component of Amazonian soils, would be profoundly affected. Mycorrhizal networks, which connect plant roots and allow the transfer of nutrients across the forest, would collapse. These networks not only support tree growth, but also stabilize soil and mediate carbon storage. Their disappearance would make it nearly impossible for new vegetation to establish, leaving the landscape vulnerable to invasive species or total degradation. Fungi, often invisible, are in many ways the foundation of life in the Amazon. Without them, the forest cannot regenerate. Microbial communities, too, are intimately tied to soil health. Bacteria and protozoa decompose organic matter, fix nitrogen, and detoxify harmful compounds. Many of these microbes have co-evolved with plants, animals, and fungi over millions of years. The sudden removal of the forest would disrupt this equilibrium, reducing microbial diversity and productivity. The soil would not only lose fertility, but also its resilience, the ability to recover from environmental shocks such as droughts, floods, or invasive species. The disappearance of the Amazon would also have hydrological consequences beneath the ground. Forest roots draw water deep into the soil, maintaining moisture levels even during dry seasons. This underground water reservoir supports both plants and animals and contributes to regional humidity. Without the forest, soils would dry out, groundwater recharge would decline, and local aquifers could be depleted. Streams and rivers fed by underground water sources would shrink, exacerbating water scarcity and threatening human communities dependent on these systems. The collapse of nutrient cycles would also have long-term evolutionary consequences. Many plants and animals have adapted to the nutrient-rich soils of the Amazon. Seeds that germinate only under specific soil conditions, symbiotic relationships between animals and plants for nutrient dispersal, and microbial processes that determine forest composition would all be disrupted over time. The absence of these nutrient flows would lead to the permanent loss of species and the simplification of ecosystems. Even on a microscopic scale, the loss of Amazonian soils would reverberate across the planet. Soils play a key role in regulating greenhouse gases beyond carbon dioxide, including methane and nitrous oxide. A dying or depleted soil system would alter these fluxes, changing atmospheric chemistry and further influencing global climate. The Earth's crust is a living, interactive component of the biosphere, and the Amazon is one of its most active and vital zones. The disappearance of the Amazon is not merely a loss of trees. It is a loss of a complex, self-sustaining ecosystem beneath the surface. Life above ground depends on life below ground, and without the interplay between forest and soil, the regenerative power of nature is crippled. The Earth's ability to recover from environmental shocks diminishes, leaving landscapes more vulnerable, fragile, and inhospitable. Ultimately, soil degradation illustrates a deeper truth. Ecosystems are inseparable from the materials and processes beneath them. The Amazon's rich soils are the silent keepers of life's continuity. Without them, the forest cannot exist, species cannot thrive, and human societies dependent on the land's productivity face mounting challenges. The forest and its soil are a single, interwoven system. To lose one is to imperil the other. In reflecting on this silent collapse, it becomes clear that the Amazon's disappearance is not only an ecological loss, but also a profound alteration of the Earth's living foundations. Life, both microscopic and monumental, depends on this fertile soil, and its loss would echo across continents, climates, and generations. The forest may rise above the ground, but its life support systems extend deep beneath our feet, quietly sustaining the vibrant world we see. Section 5. Rivers, Streams, and the Vanishing Aquatic Web. The Amazon rainforest is not just a world of towering trees and dense foliage. It is the birthplace and lifeblood of an extraordinary network of rivers, streams, and wetlands that together form the Amazon basin. This vast hydrological system, the largest on Earth, holds more fresh water than any other river network, shaping the landscape, nourishing ecosystems, and supporting millions of people. To imagine the disappearance of the Amazon is to imagine a profound upheaval of these waters, with cascading effects on aquatic life, local climates, and human societies. The Amazon River alone carries an estimated 209,000 cubic meters of water per second to the Atlantic Ocean, more than the next 7 largest rivers combined. Its flow depends directly on rainfall generated and regulated by the rainforest itself. Trees and plants pump billions of tons of water into the atmosphere daily through transpiration, contributing to the flying rivers that deliver rain both locally and to distant regions. Without the forest, rainfall would drop dramatically, reducing river flow, exposing riverbeds, and fundamentally altering the aquatic environment. Freshwater ecosystems would face immediate and dramatic changes. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, and countless invertebrates rely on consistent water levels, oxygenation, and nutrient inputs from the forest. Many species are highly specialized, thriving only in the specific conditions maintained by the rainforest canopy, leaf litter, and root systems along riverbanks. The loss of these inputs would lead to habitat degradation, higher water temperatures, reduced oxygen levels, and ultimately mass die-offs of aquatic organisms. Biodiversity would plummet, and delicate food webs would collapse. Seasonal flooding, a hallmark of the Amazon basin, would also change dramatically. Each year, rain-swollen rivers overflow their banks, depositing nutrient-rich sediment across floodplains. This process sustains plant growth, supports aquatic and terrestrial food chains, and replenishes soils for surrounding ecosystems. Without the forest, rainfall patterns would become erratic, flood cycles would shrink or vanish, and these critical nutrient flows would be disrupted. Floodplains could dry out, leaving species adapted to inundated environments without shelter, spawning grounds, or food. The disappearance of the forest would also destabilize river chemistry. Organic matter from fallen leaves, branches, and decaying plants is a primary source of nutrients for aquatic ecosystems. Microorganisms break down this matter, feeding fish, insects, and larger predators. Without the forest, This nutrient input would disappear, leaving rivers nutrient poor and less capable of supporting life. Aquatic food webs, already finely balanced, would unravel, triggering secondary extinctions that would ripple across both freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems. Water temperature would rise in the absence of the forest canopy. Shade from trees keeps rivers cooler, helping to maintain oxygen levels and suitable conditions for sensitive species. Exposed to direct sunlight, rivers and streams would warm, increasing stress on fish and amphibians, favoring more heat-tolerant but less ecologically valuable species. Oxygen solubility in water decreases as temperature rises, compounding stress on aquatic life. Some rivers could become inhospitable to species that have existed for millions of years in stable conditions. Riverbanks, no longer stabilized by dense root systems, would erode rapidly. The Amazon's vegetation binds soil, preventing sediment from washing away too quickly and maintaining the river's shape and depth. Without these natural anchors, erosion would increase, leading to muddier waters, altered river courses, and sediment buildup downstream. Aquatic species adapted to clear water conditions would struggle, while humans relying on navigable rivers for transportation or fishing would face new challenges. Wetlands and floodplain lakes, intimately connected to the forest water cycle, would also suffer. Many bird, fish, and amphibian species use these habitats as breeding grounds. Seasonal fluctuations in water levels, driven by the forest's rainfall patterns, ensure that species have time to reproduce, feed, and migrate. With erratic or diminished rainfall, these habitats would dry up or flood unpredictably, breaking life cycles and causing population declines. Wetland plants, many of which are crucial for filtering water and maintaining soil integrity, would be lost, further destabilizing the ecosystem. The disappearance of the Amazon would not only affect local aquatic species, but also migratory ones. Some birds, fish, and mammals travel thousands of kilometers, using the Amazon's rivers as corridors or sources of sustenance. Without the forest, these species would lose critical stopover points, food supplies, and safe habitats. Migration patterns would be disrupted, causing cascading effects in distant ecosystems and reducing biodiversity across continents. Humans would feel the loss acutely. Millions of people depend directly on Amazonian rivers for drinking water, food, transportation, and agriculture. Reduced river flow would threaten water availability, degrade fisheries, and disrupt transportation networks. Sediment changes could make rivers shallower or shift channels, affecting navigation and hydroelectric power generation. The economic, social, and cultural fabric of communities in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and neighboring countries would be profoundly affected, illustrating the deep interdependence between humans and the rainforest's aquatic systems. Interestingly, The Amazon's rivers also play a global role in regulating ocean chemistry and climate. The river carries nutrients and fresh water to the Atlantic, influencing coastal ecosystems and even the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, which is critical for regulating climate in North America and Europe. Without the Amazon's contribution, ocean currents could slow or shift, affecting rainfall, temperature, and storm systems thousands of miles away. The rainforest, in essence, is a master conductor not only of local rivers, but of global water cycles. The Amazon's disappearance would transform rivers from vibrant ecosystems into unstable, nutrient-poor channels. The intricate dance of water, life, and nutrients would unravel, leaving behind a shadow of what once was. Streams and lakes would become lifeless corridors. Fish populations would collapse. Amphibians and reptiles would vanish. Aquatic food webs would fracture. The living water that has sustained both species and human civilizations would be gone. In contemplating this, it becomes clear that the Amazon rainforest is not only a forest, but a living hydrological system. Its rivers and streams, intimately linked to the forest canopy and soils, form a circulatory system for the continent. To lose the Amazon is to sever this system, destabilizing both life and the water that makes life possible. Every drop of water, every fish, every wetland plant is part of a delicate balance, sustained for millennia by the forest's presence and lost almost instantly if the rainforest were gone. Section 6. Breathing Earth, Oxygen, Air Quality, and Atmospheric Balance. The Amazon rainforest is often referred to as the lungs of the planet, and this metaphor captures only part of its importance. Beyond its lush canopy and sprawling rivers, the forest is a critical regulator of atmospheric oxygen and carbon dioxide, maintaining a balance that sustains life not only in South America, but across the globe. To imagine the Amazon disappearing is to imagine a silent but profound shift in the air we breathe, a transformation both invisible and deeply consequential. Every leaf, every branch, every tree in the Amazon participates in a grand chemical dance. Through photosynthesis, plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. While the majority of this oxygen is consumed locally by respiration, decay, and fires, the forest still contributes roughly 20% of the planet's net oxygen production when considering the balance with oceanic sources. The disappearance of the Amazon would remove this vital contribution, subtly altering the composition of the atmosphere. At first, the changes in oxygen concentration may appear minor. After all, the Earth's atmosphere contains roughly 21% oxygen, and a slight reduction may not be immediately life-threatening. But the real impact would be seen in conjunction with the simultaneous surge in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Without the forest to absorb carbon, the atmospheric concentration of CO2 would rise, accelerating global warming. Warmer air holds less oxygen, making life increasingly stressful for both humans and animals, particularly in densely populated or ecologically sensitive areas. Air quality would also degrade in profound ways. The Amazon filters dust, pollutants, and particulate matter through its dense canopy and undergrowth. It removes airborne toxins and stabilizes the atmospheric chemistry in ways that affect local and regional air currents. Without this natural filtration system, pollutants from agriculture, industry, and urban areas would disperse more freely, increasing the prevalence of respiratory illnesses and weakening the health of ecosystems already under stress. Cities downwind from former rainforest regions might experience more frequent smog events, while rural areas could see shifts in plant growth and soil chemistry due to altered precipitation and deposition of pollutants. The forest's disappearance would also disrupt the cycle of volatile organic compounds, VOCs, it emits. These compounds, released by leaves and branches, react with other chemicals in the atmosphere to form cloud condensation nuclei. Clouds, in turn, regulate both local and regional temperatures by reflecting sunlight and maintaining humidity. Without VOC emissions, cloud formation would decline, resulting in less rainfall, higher temperatures, and a drier climate. Conditions that further accelerate the degradation of remaining ecosystems. In this way, the Amazon functions as an atmospheric engineer, invisible but essential to climate stability. Respiration patterns of Earth's living organisms would also be affected. With fewer trees absorbing carbon dioxide, atmospheric concentrations of this greenhouse gas would rise, creating feedback loops that alter the composition of air. Plants and animals, including humans, rely on a delicate balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide to survive. Even slight deviations over extended periods can stress physiological systems, reduce crop yields, and alter growth rates for countless species. The forest's absence would therefore have subtle but pervasive effects on all aerobic life. The Amazon also regulates air humidity, which directly influences how oxygen and other gases are transported and retained in the atmosphere. Through transpiration, trees release vast amounts of water vapor that maintain moisture levels in the air. Humid air facilitates oxygen exchange, sustains cloud formation, and helps cool the planet. Without the forest, the air would become drier, exacerbating temperature extremes, reducing rainfall, and further destabilizing atmospheric chemistry. The forest's presence is like a living barometer, modulating the composition and circulation of the air above it. Microclimates that depend on this interplay of air, water, and canopy cover would vanish. Lowland areas that experience daily cooling from forest evapotranspiration would instead see heat intensify. Forest floor layers, once rich in oxygen from leaf respiration and decomposition, would dry out, limiting the survival of organisms adapted to low light, high humidity conditions. Even small-scale weather events, morning dew, gentle rainfall, localized breezes, would change, demonstrating how deeply the Amazon's atmospheric influence reaches. The effects would not be confined to South America. Winds carry air masses and aerosols across continents and oceans. Pollutants that the Amazon would normally filter might spread further, and climate patterns influenced by forest transpiration would shift, potentially altering rainfall in North America, Africa, and even parts of Europe. The forest's contribution to global oxygen and air quality is therefore not just local, but planetary. A reminder of how interconnected Earth's systems truly are. Human health and well-being would be subtly but inexorably affected. Reduced air filtration and oxygen production could exacerbate respiratory diseases, particularly in urban centers and industrial regions. Food security would decline as crop yields fall under altered humidity, temperature, and soil conditions. Indirect effects on freshwater availability, insect populations, and forest-derived medicines would compound these challenges. The forest's disappearance would therefore be felt not only in the atmosphere, but in human physiology, agriculture, and medicine. Finally, the loss of the Amazon would diminish Earth's resilience to future environmental challenges. Forests act as buffers against atmospheric fluctuations, absorbing shocks from heat waves, pollution, and carbon spikes. Without this natural stabilizer, Earth's atmosphere would become more sensitive to human-induced and natural disturbances alike. Every change in the air, temperature swings, altered humidity, rising carbon levels, would be amplified, creating an increasingly volatile climate system. In essence, the Amazon rainforest is not merely a collection of trees and rivers. It is a living atmospheric regulator, a silent guardian of oxygen, air quality, and climate stability. Its disappearance would unravel the balance of gases, moisture, and temperatures, with effects cascading across continents and oceans. Life on Earth, which evolved within this finely tuned atmosphere, would face a planet fundamentally altered. Through this lens, we see the Amazon as more than a forest. It is an integral part of the planet's circulatory and respiratory system, shaping air, weather, and life itself. Its presence reminds us that the air we breathe, the climate we inhabit, and the very health of our planet are deeply intertwined with the flourishing of a single remarkable ecosystem. Losing it would be a quiet catastrophe, felt in every breath, every breeze, and every cloud that fails to form in its absence. Section 7. The Human Connection. How Societies Would Face the Amazon's Loss. The Amazon rainforest is not merely a wilderness of trees and rivers. It is home to millions of people, including countless indigenous communities whose lives, cultures, and survival are intimately tied to the forest. To imagine the Amazon disappearing is to imagine the loss of a home, a food source, a medicine cabinet, and a cultural repository, all in one. Human societies would feel this impact immediately and profoundly, as the disappearance of the rainforest disrupts not just ecosystems, but the very foundations of human life. Indigenous peoples have lived in harmony with the Amazon for millennia, developing intricate knowledge of its plants, animals, and weather patterns. They rely on the forest for food, shelter, and medicine. Fruits, nuts, tubers, and game provide sustenance, while plants are used to treat ailments ranging from infections to chronic diseases. Should the forest vanish, these communities would face sudden scarcity, losing both nutrition and remedies that have been passed down through generations. Survival itself would become precarious. Beyond subsistence, the Amazon provides essential resources for broader human populations. Millions of people across South America depend on the forest for clean water, timber, and materials for building, crafting, and fuel. The disappearance of trees would reduce shade, increase soil erosion, and degrade water quality. Rivers would carry more sediment and pollutants, impacting freshwater supplies for both urban and rural areas. Communities that rely on river transport would struggle to adapt as navigable channels change or dry up. The economic consequences would be staggering. Many industries, from agriculture and fishing to ecotourism and pharmaceuticals, are directly or indirectly linked to the rainforest. Coffee, cocoa, Brazil nuts, and other crops depend on the climate stabilization, pollination, and soil fertility the forest provides. Ecotourism, which supports thousands of jobs and provides incentives for conservation, would collapse without the forest's biodiversity and scenic beauty. Pharmaceutical research, dependent on plants and microorganisms unique to the Amazon, would lose invaluable opportunities for innovation and medicine. Culturally, the forest is a living library of human history and spirituality. Many indigenous groups incorporate the Amazon into rituals, oral histories, and social structures. Songs, stories, and ceremonies often reflect relationships with specific rivers, trees, or animals. The disappearance of the forest would erase these cultural touchstones, severing connections to ancestral knowledge and identity. For these communities, the loss would not just be physical, it would be profoundly existential. The social fabric of larger populations would also fray under the strain of the Amazon's disappearance. With declining resources, food scarcity, and reduced clean water, conflicts over access to essential supplies would likely increase. Migration pressures could intensify as people move in search of habitable lands, further straining urban infrastructure and social systems. Health crises would follow, driven by reduced nutrition, waterborne diseases, and the loss of traditional medicines. In this way, the forest's disappearance would ripple far beyond the Amazon basin, influencing societies thousands of kilometers away. Even cities that appear disconnected from the rainforest would feel its absence. The forest plays a role in global rainfall patterns, including those that feed agricultural regions far from South America. Changes in precipitation would reduce crop yields in distant regions, increase food prices, and exacerbate global food insecurity. The Amazon's loss would be a human crisis on multiple scales, from local subsistence to global supply chains. Food security, in particular, would face new challenges. The Amazon supports pollinators that travel to agricultural zones, and its rivers deliver nutrients downstream that sustain fisheries. Without these contributions, both plant and animal food sources would decline. Farmers and fishers would face reduced yields, while urban populations would struggle with higher prices and less reliable supply. The disappearance of the Amazon is therefore not only an environmental issue, but also a profound human vulnerability. Education and knowledge would also suffer. The Amazon has been a living laboratory for scientists, students, and researchers for centuries. Biological, ecological, and climatic studies rely on the forest's complexity. Its loss would close doors on centuries of understanding and discovery, eliminating a critical resource for science, learning, and innovation. Future generations would inherit a world poorer in knowledge, less connected to the intricacies of life on Earth. Psychologically, the disappearance of the Amazon would have subtle but significant effects. Humans have an innate connection to nature, often called biophilia, and large, thriving forests are central to this experience. The loss of a forest so massive, so biologically complex, could affect mental health, cultural identity, and a sense of place. Even for those who have never lived near the Amazon, understanding its disappearance would be a reminder of the fragility of life on Earth, producing a profound sense of grief and vulnerability. Yet amid this immense loss, human resilience might emerge in unexpected ways. Some communities would adapt, finding alternative food sources, rebuilding water systems, or innovating new agricultural methods. Conservation efforts, reforestation projects, and global awareness campaigns could be strengthened as the scale of loss becomes apparent. However, the scope of adaptation would never fully replace the living systems of the Amazon, and the depth of cultural, ecological, and physiological losses would remain a stark reality. In contemplating the human consequences of the Amazon's disappearance, it becomes clear that the forest is not simply an ecosystem. It is a life support system for millions of people. Its trees, rivers, soils, and species are deeply intertwined with human survival, culture, and economy. To lose the forest is to lose not only biodiversity, but also knowledge, identity, and resilience. The Amazon teaches us that human societies cannot exist in isolation from the natural systems they depend upon, and that our fate is inseparable from the forests that have sustained us for millennia. The Amazon is a reminder that humanity is part of an intricate web of life, and that disrupting one critical component can reverberate across the entire system. Its disappearance would challenge the very notion of security, forcing humans to confront the fragility of their existence and the profound interdependence between life and the environment. Section 8. Shifting Skies. Global Climate Patterns Without the Amazon. The Amazon rainforest is not only a massive carbon sink and home to untold biodiversity, it is a critical engine driving global climate patterns. Its influence extends far beyond South America, shaping rainfall, temperature, and atmospheric circulation across continents. To imagine the Amazon disappearing is to envision a planet in which the rhythms of weather themselves are altered, with consequences that echo across every corner of the globe. At the heart of this influence is the forest's role in the water cycle. Trees release vast amounts of water vapor through transpiration, which then forms clouds and returns as rainfall. This cycle is essential not only for sustaining the rainforest itself, but also for maintaining weather stability throughout South America. The phenomenon of flying rivers carries moisture from the Amazon to regions as far as the Andes, central Brazil, and even southern South America, feeding rivers and replenishing soils. Without this moisture, rainfall would diminish dramatically, transforming once fertile regions into drylands. Reduced rainfall would have immediate consequences for ecosystems and human societies. Agricultural regions that rely on predictable wet seasons would face droughts, threatening food security and livelihoods. Forests beyond the Amazon might struggle to survive without the humidity that the Amazon exports. Lakes and wetlands could dry, fish populations would decline, and groundwater recharge would be reduced. The loss of these rain cycles would ripple outward, causing a chain reaction of ecological stress across the continent. But the Amazon's influence reaches even further. Atmospheric circulation patterns, including the Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ, depend on the heat and moisture produced by the rainforest. The ITCZ drives global wind patterns and influences precipitation in tropical regions across the world, from Africa to Southeast Asia. The disappearance of the Amazon would reduce heat and moisture flux into the atmosphere, shifting these circulation patterns and altering rainfall distribution thousands of kilometers away. Monsoons could weaken, deserts could expand, and regions accustomed to seasonal rains might experience prolonged drought. Temperature regulation is another critical function of the forest. The Amazon's dense canopy shades the ground, reduces evaporation from soil, and cools the surrounding air through transpiration. Without this cooling effect, surface temperatures in the region would rise, further reducing rainfall, as warmer air holds more moisture but releases it less readily. This feedback loop could amplify drought conditions, increase the frequency of heat waves, and place further stress on remaining ecosystems. The loss of the Amazon would also impact extreme weather events globally. Hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons are influenced by ocean and atmospheric temperatures, which are in turn moderated by moisture fluxes from forests and rivers. Changes in rainfall and temperature patterns from the Amazon's disappearance could alter the formation, intensity, and trajectories of these storms. Regions that previously experienced moderate storm seasons might face more intense or unpredictable events, while areas previously less affected could find themselves in the path of new extreme weather patterns. Oceans, too, would feel the ripple effects. Freshwater input from the Amazon River into the Atlantic plays a role in regulating salinity, which affects ocean currents such as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC. This system helps distribute heat globally, moderating climates in Europe, North America, and beyond. Without the Amazon's contribution, salinity could increase, potentially slowing or destabilizing currents and triggering shifts in weather patterns across the northern hemisphere. The disappearance of a single rainforest could in this way affect climate systems thousands of miles away. The Amazon also acts as a buffer against atmospheric carbon spikes, moderating the greenhouse effect and keeping temperature rises within tolerable limits. Without this buffer, global temperatures would climb more quickly, amplifying the frequency and severity of heat waves, droughts, and extreme precipitation events. The forest's disappearance would therefore accelerate climate change, creating new and intensified weather challenges worldwide. The cascading effects extend into feedback loops that scientists call tipping points. As the rainforest vanishes, regional droughts would make the remaining forest more susceptible to fire, further releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Less rainfall and more heat would accelerate desertification in surrounding regions, while the planet's atmospheric systems become more volatile. These tipping points could push ecosystems into irreversible states, making climate patterns more unpredictable and threatening the resilience of human societies. Even seemingly distant regions like North America, Europe, and Africa would experience indirect effects. Shifts in wind patterns, rainfall distribution, and ocean currents could disrupt agricultural cycles, water availability, and seasonal weather expectations. Countries dependent on predictable monsoons or trade winds might face prolonged drought or excessive rainfall, altering both human economies and natural ecosystems. The Amazon, in essence, is a linchpin in a planetary web of atmospheric balance, and its disappearance would destabilize that web. The disappearance of the Amazon would also affect cloud formation and sunlight absorption on a global scale. Trees and soils reflect and absorb solar radiation in ways that influence regional temperatures. Without the forest, more sunlight would reach the surface, heating land and water unevenly. This would exacerbate droughts, increase heat stress, and alter atmospheric currents, creating a feedback loop in which global weather becomes more chaotic and extreme. In this vision of a post-Amazon world, the Earth's climate becomes a more fragile and unpredictable system. Seasonal rhythms that have guided agriculture, water cycles, and human societies for millennia would be disrupted. Natural disasters would become more frequent, more intense, and less predictable. The disappearance of the rainforest, while localized in space, would be global in effect, a stark illustration of how interconnected and interdependent Earth's systems truly are. Ultimately, the Amazon rainforest is far more than a collection of trees and rivers. It is a climate engine, a stabilizing force that shapes weather, water, and temperature across continents. Its disappearance would not just alter local conditions, it would transform the very patterns of life on Earth, revealing the delicate balance on which human societies, ecosystems, and planetary stability depend. The forest reminds us that even a single ecosystem can influence the fate of the entire planet, and its loss would echo in every storm, every drought, and every shifting season. Section 9. A world without wonders, biodiversity collapse, and extinction cascades. The Amazon rainforest is home to an astonishing array of life. Its trees, plants, fungi, insects, mammals, birds, amphibians, and microorganisms together form one of the most complex ecosystems on Earth. To imagine the Amazon disappearing is to imagine the unraveling of this intricate web of life, a cascade of extinctions and ecological loss that would reverberate far beyond the forest itself. Biodiversity in the Amazon is unparalleled. Scientists estimate that the rainforest contains at least 10% of all known species on the planet, with many more yet undiscovered. Each organism has a role. Predators regulate prey. Pollinators sustain flowering plants, and decomposers recycle nutrients. These interconnections form a delicate balance, where the removal of one species can have ripple effects throughout the ecosystem. Without the forest, this balance would collapse, causing immediate and long-term extinctions. The most visible impact would be on large mammals. Iconic species such as jaguars, tapirs, and giant river otters rely on dense forest and interconnected waterways for hunting, shelter, and breeding. The loss of trees and rivers would fragment habitats, isolate populations, and limit food availability. Many species, unable to adapt quickly, would face extinction. The disappearance of these animals would further disrupt ecological relationships. For example, seed dispersal would decline, preventing forest regeneration and compounding the collapse. Bird populations would also suffer. Many Amazonian birds are highly specialized, feeding on specific fruits, insects, or nectar from particular plants. The loss of these plants would reduce food sources, forcing birds to migrate or perish. Migratory species that rely on the Amazon as a stopover would find their paths disrupted, potentially impacting ecosystems on other continents. The cascading effects extend far beyond the forest, illustrating the global importance of Amazonian biodiversity. insect populations would experience dramatic changes as well. Beetles, ants, butterflies, and countless other insects perform essential roles: pollination, decomposition, and soil aeration. Many of these species are so specialized that their survival depends entirely on the presence of particular plants or trees. As the forest vanishes, insect populations would plummet, leading to reduced pollination and further declines in plant reproduction. This creates a feedback loop. Fewer plants mean fewer insects, which in turn means even fewer plants. Amphibians, which are sensitive to changes in moisture, temperature, and habitat, would be among the first to disappear. Frogs, salamanders, and caecilians thrive in the humid understory, often relying on specific microhabitats for breeding. As the forest dries and warms, these creatures would struggle to survive, with many species facing extinction. Their loss would not only reduce biodiversity, but also disrupt insect populations, as amphibians play a crucial role in controlling them. Aquatic species would not escape the consequences either. Fish, turtles, and freshwater invertebrates depend on the Amazon's rivers, streams, and floodplains for survival. As water levels drop and rivers become more turbid and nutrient-poor, many aquatic species would vanish. Predatory fish would decline without prey, while the loss of aquatic plants would reduce oxygen levels, creating inhospitable conditions for remaining species. The aquatic web of life would unravel just as dramatically as the terrestrial one. Even microorganisms, often unseen but critical to life, would be affected. Soil bacteria, fungi, and protozoa mediate nutrient cycles, support plant growth, and regulate carbon storage. With the forest gone, these microbial communities would lose their primary sources of organic matter, resulting in diminished diversity and function. The collapse of these microscopic ecosystems would accelerate soil degradation, reduce nutrient recycling, and limit the potential for ecological recovery. The Amazon's disappearance would also trigger cascading extinctions through the loss of mutualistic relationships. Many plants rely on specific animals for pollination or seed dispersal, while certain predators control herbivore populations to prevent overgrazing. When one species disappears, its ecological partners may follow, creating a domino effect across the ecosystem. This extinction cascade would continue until the rainforest's complexity is drastically simplified. The genetic reservoir contained within the Amazon would be lost. Plants and animals in the rainforest carry unique genes that enable adaptation to changing conditions, disease resistance, and ecological resilience. These genetic resources are invaluable not only for the survival of the species themselves, but also for human applications, from agriculture to medicine. The forest's disappearance would mean the permanent loss of these genetic libraries, limiting humanity's ability to adapt and innovate in response to environmental challenges. Insects, birds, mammals, amphibians, fish, fungi, and microorganisms all contribute to the Amazon's astonishing web of life. Its disappearance would transform a vibrant, multi-layered ecosystem into a simplified landscape, devoid of the richness that took millions of years to evolve. The cascading extinctions would affect ecosystems worldwide. demonstrating the interconnectedness of life. A single forest, when lost, can trigger a planetary-scale disruption of biodiversity. Reflecting on the biodiversity collapse, it becomes clear that the Amazon is not just a collection of species, but a living network of relationships, interactions, and processes. Its disappearance would not be a silent event. It would echo through the natural world, leaving a planet that is less resilient, less diverse, and less vibrant. Every tree lost, every species gone, represents a loss not just for the forest, but for life itself. Section 10. Vanished Wealth. Economic and Medicinal Consequences of Losing the Amazon. The Amazon rainforest is more than a natural wonder. It is a treasure trove of economic and medicinal resources, many of which remain untapped or undiscovered. Its disappearance would not just be an environmental catastrophe. It would ripple through global economies, healthcare systems, and human innovation. To imagine a world without the Amazon is to imagine the sudden evaporation of invaluable goods, potential medicines, and livelihoods that billions of people depend upon. One of the most visible economic impacts would be the collapse of agriculture and extractive industries that rely on the forest's resources. Brazil nuts, a multi-million-dollar export, grow exclusively in wild forests and depend on the rainforest's complex ecosystem for pollination and seed dispersal. Without the Amazon, this industry would vanish, affecting local economies and the global food supply. Similarly, the collection of fruits, fibers, and resins that support small-scale communities would disappear, depriving millions of their income and subsistence. Timber and construction materials, another cornerstone of local economies, would also vanish. While over-harvesting is a concern, managed sustainable logging provides income and materials for housing, furniture, and artisanal crafts. The sudden loss of the forest would eliminate these opportunities, forcing communities to turn to less sustainable alternatives, further stressing the environment and human welfare. The Amazon is also a critical source of fresh water, which directly supports agriculture and hydroelectric power generation. Rivers fed by the forest provide irrigation for crops far beyond the rainforest itself. With diminished rainfall and altered river flows, farmers would face droughts, declining yields, and higher costs for water management. The disappearance of the Amazon would exacerbate food insecurity regionally and globally, impacting both local communities and international markets. Beyond tangible goods, the forest is a living pharmacy. The Amazon is home to thousands of plant species with medicinal properties, many still unknown to modern science. These plants have given rise to medications that treat heart disease, cancer, infections, and other ailments. The loss of the forest would mean the permanent loss of countless genetic resources and biochemical compounds, some of which could hold cures for diseases yet to emerge. Humanity's ability to innovate in medicine would be drastically curtailed, and countless opportunities for life-saving treatments would vanish. Even species that appear insignificant, like insects or fungi, carry potential economic and medicinal value. Insects pollinate crops that feed billions, while fungi and microorganisms found in forest soils may harbor enzymes, antibiotics, and other compounds useful for industry and healthcare. The disappearance of these organisms would eliminate a vast and largely untapped library of resources, reducing humanity's capacity to adapt, innovate, and sustain itself. Tourism is another sector intimately tied to the Amazon. Ecotourism draws millions of visitors each year, providing income for local communities and promoting conservation awareness. Wildlife viewing, river excursions, and cultural experiences depend entirely on the forest's presence. Without it, the economic benefits of tourism would vanish, and opportunities for education and sustainable development would be lost. Local communities would lose livelihoods, and the world would lose a direct connection to one of its most extraordinary natural wonders. The disappearance of the Amazon would also have ripple effects on global trade and industry. Agricultural commodities from regions influenced by the forest's climate could decline due to altered rainfall and temperature patterns. Fisheries that depend on freshwater inputs from Amazonian rivers would see reduced productivity. Even industries as far removed as pharmaceuticals and biotechnology would face constraints due to the loss of genetic and biochemical diversity. The economic consequences are therefore both direct and indirect, local and global, immediate and long-term. Energy production could also be affected. Rivers fed by the Amazon support hydroelectric power plants that supply electricity to millions of people. With reduced river flows, hydroelectric generation would decline, forcing increased reliance on fossil fuels, raising energy costs, and increasing greenhouse gas emissions. The forest, in this sense, indirectly sustains clean energy infrastructure, and its loss would exacerbate the challenges of climate change while reducing energy security. The cumulative impact on human health, wealth, and innovation would be staggering. Millions of people would lose income, food sources, and medicines. Global industries would face disruption, and countless opportunities for scientific discovery would vanish forever. The Amazon is not merely a natural resource. It is a foundation for human economic, cultural, and scientific progress. Its disappearance would be felt in boardrooms, laboratories, hospitals, and homes around the world. Perhaps most poignantly, the Amazon's disappearance would highlight humanity's fragile dependence on natural systems. The economic and medicinal losses would not be reversible. Unlike other industries, the loss of biodiversity, genetic diversity, and ecological complexity cannot be replaced with human ingenuity alone. The forest's natural wealth represents centuries of evolution, an irreplaceable capital stock that sustains life in ways modern technology cannot fully replicate. In this light, the Amazon becomes a symbol of interconnection between humanity and nature. The forest's value is not only ecological or aesthetic, but deeply practical. Its rivers, trees, soils, and species are assets that underpin economies, support healthcare, and inspire scientific discovery. Losing the Amazon would be like losing a library of knowledge, a store of medicine, and a vital economic engine all at once. A silent catastrophe with consequences that would be felt for generations. Even as we reflect on these losses, one truth remains clear. Protecting the Amazon is not only an ecological imperative, but an economic and human one. Its disappearance would remove countless opportunities for wealth, innovation, and well-being, leaving a world poorer, less healthy, and less capable of sustaining life. The forest reminds us that true wealth is not measured solely in money, but in the richness of ecosystems, species, and the life-sustaining processes that connect us all. Section 11. Storms and Skies. The Amazon's role in global weather extremes. The Amazon rainforest is more than a repository of life and a source of oxygen. It is a colossal engine influencing the very weather that shapes continents. Its disappearance would not only alter local climates, but would send shockwaves through global atmospheric systems, increasing the frequency and intensity of storms, droughts, and extreme weather events worldwide. To imagine the Amazon gone is to imagine a planet where the rhythm of the skies itself has shifted. At the heart of this influence is the forest's effect on humidity and rainfall. Through transpiration, trees release vast amounts of water vapor into the atmosphere. This moisture contributes to cloud formation and precipitation, not only sustaining the rainforest itself, but feeding river systems and supporting agriculture across South America. When this source of moisture disappears, the skies dry, rainfall diminishes, and the delicate balance that regulates temperature and wind patterns begins to unravel. One immediate consequence would be the intensification of droughts. Regions dependent on the flying rivers of moisture carried from the Amazon would receive significantly less rainfall. This would affect countries like Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Bolivia, where agriculture relies on seasonal rains. Crops would fail, water scarcity would increase, and wildfires could ignite more frequently, feeding back into climate change by releasing stored carbon into the atmosphere. The forest acts as a natural moderator of droughts, and its absence would leave regions vulnerable to prolonged dry spells. The Amazon also influences extreme weather phenomena far beyond South America. Moisture and heat released from the forest help regulate atmospheric circulation patterns, including the Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ. The ITCZ affects rainfall and monsoon patterns in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. Without the forest's contribution, these circulation patterns could shift, leading to changes in the timing, intensity, and distribution of monsoons. Farmers thousands of miles away could see altered growing seasons, reduced yields, or devastating floods. Hurricanes and cyclones could also be affected indirectly. These storms derive energy from warm, moist air over oceans, but the distribution of moisture and heat in the atmosphere influences where and how intensely they form. With the Amazon gone, moisture levels in the atmosphere would decline, and global wind patterns would change. Storm paths could become less predictable, increasing the risk of devastating impacts on populated areas. Regions historically spared from intense storms might find themselves in harm's way, while traditional hurricane zones could experience stronger or more erratic storms. Local weather extremes would become more severe. Without the cooling and moisture provided by the forest, temperatures in the Amazon basin and surrounding areas would rise. Heat waves would become more frequent and intense, compounding stress on ecosystems and human communities. The reduction in cloud cover would lead to more direct sunlight reaching the ground, further heating the land and exacerbating conditions for drought and fire. In this way, the Amazon functions as a natural thermostat, and its absence would leave temperatures unchecked. The interplay between forest loss and atmospheric carbon is also critical. Trees absorb and store vast amounts of carbon dioxide. Without them, greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere would rise, trapping more heat and intensifying global warming. Higher temperatures increase evaporation rates, drying soils and vegetation, which in turn heightens the risk of extreme heat events, wildfires, and sudden flash droughts. The forest's disappearance would thus amplify climate volatility across the globe. Snow and rainfall patterns in distant regions could also shift. Changes in wind and moisture transport would affect mountain ranges, plains, and even coastal climates. Regions like the Andes, dependent on seasonal snowfall and river runoff originating from Amazon-fed rains, could see reduced water availability. Rivers would become more erratic, affecting agriculture, hydroelectric power, and freshwater ecosystems. The loss of Amazonian moisture would not be localized. It would ripple through continents, altering the hydrological balance far from the forest itself. Sea level and ocean currents could also be indirectly influenced. Reduced rainfall in the Amazon basin would affect river discharge into the Atlantic Ocean, altering salinity and potentially influencing the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, AMOC. This major ocean current redistributes heat globally and helps stabilize climate patterns. Even small disruptions could lead to more extreme weather events in Europe, North America, and Africa, demonstrating the interdependence between the rainforest and global systems. The Amazon also helps stabilize local winds. The heat and moisture released from trees drive convection, creating air pressure gradients that regulate wind patterns. Without this mechanism, winds could become more erratic, storms less predictable, and local climates more extreme. Urban and rural areas alike would face challenges, from infrastructure damage due to stronger winds to agricultural losses caused by sudden weather swings. Ultimately, the Amazon's disappearance would create a planet where weather is less stable, less predictable, and more extreme. From heat waves and droughts to stronger storms and disrupted monsoons, the loss of this single forest would have cascading consequences for human societies, ecosystems, and the global economy. Life, as we have come to know it, depends on the forest's moderation of the skies, a subtle but powerful influence that ensures the rhythms of rainfall, wind, and temperature remain within survivable ranges. In reflecting on this, it becomes clear that the Amazon rainforest is not merely a regional forest. It is a global regulator, silently shaping weather and climate patterns across continents. Its disappearance would leave Earth's atmosphere unbalanced, more volatile, and less forgiving. Every cloudless sky, every extended drought, every violent storm would be a reminder of what has been lost. A living system that connected the rhythms of the forest to the pulse of the entire planet. Section 12. Rivers run dry. The Amazon's influence on soil, water, and landforms. The Amazon rainforest is often celebrated for its dense canopy and vibrant wildlife. Yet beneath it lies another realm of influence, the soil, rivers, and landforms that sustain both nature and human life. The forest is a master engineer of landscapes, shaping rivers, replenishing soils, and maintaining the delicate balance between erosion and sedimentation. Its disappearance would trigger profound changes in the physical structure of the earth, creating consequences that would last for centuries. Rivers in the Amazon basin are fed by both rainfall and the forest's moisture contribution. Transpiration from billions of trees adds water to the atmosphere, which returns as precipitation to rivers, streams, and floodplains. This continuous cycle maintains river levels, ensures seasonal flooding, and nourishes the floodplain soils that sustain life. Without the forest, rainfall would decline, reducing river flows and lowering water levels. Navigable rivers could shrink or dry in parts, disrupting transportation, fisheries, and access to essential resources for millions of people. The river networks themselves would change. Reduced flow would mean slower currents, allowing sediment to accumulate in certain areas and erode others in unpredictable ways. Floodplains that have long relied on seasonal inundation to deposit fertile silt would become nutrient-poor, impairing both natural vegetation and human agriculture. Areas that once teemed with aquatic life would see rivers become stagnant or fragmented, creating inhospitable conditions for fish, amphibians, and other species. Soil health would decline dramatically. The Amazon's canopy shields the forest floor from direct sunlight and heavy rainfall, preventing erosion. Tree roots bind soil together, maintaining the structure necessary for plant growth. The disappearance of trees would leave soils exposed to wind, sun, and erratic rainfall, leading to rapid degradation. Nutrient cycling, which depends on decomposing plant matter, would halt, and fertile topsoils could erode or leach away, leaving behind compacted, less productive earth. The loss of soil fertility would have long-term consequences for ecosystems and human communities alike. The geomorphology of the region would also shift. Riverbanks, deltas, and floodplains sculpted over millennia by the interaction of water and forest would begin to change. Without stabilizing vegetation, slopes would become prone to landslides, riverbanks would collapse more readily, and sediment transport would alter river courses. Wetlands, oxbow lakes, and seasonal marshes could vanish, replaced by dry, unstable land. These changes would not only reshape landscapes, but also remove habitats for countless species and compromise human infrastructure. Aquifers and groundwater recharge would be affected as well. The forest plays a crucial role in maintaining soil permeability and water retention. Rainwater seeps into the ground, replenishing aquifers that support wells, springs, and rivers during dry periods. Without the forest, Less water would infiltrate the soil, and more would run off the surface, leading to flash floods, soil erosion, and diminished groundwater reserves. Water security for both humans and wildlife would decline, intensifying stress on communities and ecosystems. The disappearance of the forest would also accelerate desertification in certain regions. Areas that depend on Amazon-fed rainfall could experience prolonged dryness, reducing vegetation cover and leaving soils exposed to wind erosion. Once fertile landscapes could transform into degraded savannas or semi-arid zones. These changes would alter local climates further, creating feedback loops where less vegetation leads to higher temperatures, lower humidity, and even greater soil degradation. Nutrient cycling would be disrupted on a continental scale. The Amazon forest acts as a biological pump, recycling nitrogen, phosphorus, and other essential nutrients through plant growth, decomposition, and plant growth, and river transport. The loss of this cycle would impoverish soils not only locally, but downstream, affecting agricultural lands and natural habitats throughout South America. Floodplains, which rely on annual nutrient deposits, would become increasingly infertile, reducing the capacity to support plant, animal, and human life. The impact on aquatic ecosystems would be profound. Rivers carry not only water, but also sediments, organic matter, and nutrients that sustain diverse communities of fish, amphibians, and invertebrates. Reduced flow and altered sediment patterns would disrupt food chains, reduce breeding grounds, and fragment habitats. Many species adapted to specific river conditions could face extinction, while others might migrate, creating cascading ecological effects across regions. Human infrastructure would be vulnerable as well. Bridges, dams, and irrigation systems designed around predictable river flows would face stress from altered water levels and unexpected erosion. Communities that rely on rivers for transportation, drinking water, and energy would struggle to adapt. The disappearance of the Amazon would therefore not just affect nature. It would reshape human settlement patterns, infrastructure planning, and resource management for generations. In reflecting on these changes, it becomes clear that the Amazon functions as a geophysical stabilizer. Its trees, roots, and vegetation influence not only the surface environment, but also the water systems and soils that underpin life. The disappearance of the forest would be more than an ecological loss. It would be a fundamental reshaping of the Earth's surface, a slow but inexorable alteration of landscapes, rivers, and soils that humans and wildlife alike depend upon. The Amazon's role in sculpting and sustaining the land underscores a profound truth. Ecosystems are not isolated, static entities. They are active participants in the shaping of the planet, mediating water, soil, and climate. Losing the Amazon would remove one of the most influential engineers of Earth's surface, leaving a planet more fragile, less fertile, and more vulnerable to extreme weather and human stress. Every river that slows, every soil that erodes, and every floodplain that dries would be a reminder that the Amazon was more than trees. It was the heartbeat of a continent, a silent force shaping the land beneath our feet and sustaining life above it. Section 13. The Final Ripple: Cumulative Impacts and the Legacy of Loss. As we reach the final reflections on a world without the Amazon rainforest, the full scope of its disappearance comes into view. The forest's influence stretches from the microscopic soil organisms beneath its canopy to the atmospheric currents circulating across continents. Its loss would be a multi-layered catastrophe: ecological, climatic, economic, and cultural, unfolding over years, decades, and even centuries. To contemplate this is to grasp both the fragility and interconnectedness of life on Earth. The cascading consequences begin locally, but do not remain confined. Species that depend on the forest for survival would vanish, triggering a domino effect through ecosystems worldwide. Predators lose prey, pollinators lose plants, and nutrient cycles collapse. Every extinction reduces the resilience of remaining systems, increasing vulnerability to environmental stressors. In this simplified world, even minor disturbances, storms, droughts, fires, could have disproportionately devastating effects, because the Amazon no longer provides the buffering stability it has offered for millennia. Humans would feel the shockwaves acutely. Indigenous communities, the original stewards of the rainforest, would face immediate crises of survival, losing access to food, medicine, and cultural touchstones. Wider societies would struggle with altered rainfall patterns, reduced agricultural productivity, and water scarcity. Global markets would experience disruption as commodities reliant on the Amazon, fruits, nuts, timber, and more, vanish. Pharmaceutical research would lose an irreplaceable source of genetic and biochemical diversity. Economies, healthcare, and innovation would all bear the weight of the forest's absence. Climate systems would unravel further. Reduced rainfall and atmospheric moisture would intensify droughts, heat waves, and desertification in regions far beyond South America. Storms would become more erratic, hurricane paths less predictable, and extreme weather events more frequent. The Amazon, which once acted as a stabilizer of both temperature and precipitation, would no longer moderate the global climate. Its disappearance would accelerate warming, destabilize wind patterns, and weaken the resilience of ecosystems and human communities alike. Rivers and soils would transform, compounding the crisis. Seasonal flooding would cease, depriving floodplains of nutrient-rich sediment. Rivers would shrink, meander unpredictably, and sometimes dry in parts. Soil fertility would plummet, erosion would accelerate, and once lush landscapes could turn into degraded savannas or semi-arid zones. Aquifers would recharge more slowly, reducing the availability of fresh water for humans, plants, and animals. In this way, the forest's disappearance would alter the very shape of the land, creating challenges that humanity has never faced before on such a scale. Beyond the physical and economic consequences, the cultural and psychological impacts would be profound. Humans have evolved within the context of forests, rivers, and complex ecosystems. The Amazon embodies a connection to nature that inspires art, spirituality, and scientific curiosity. Its disappearance would represent a loss not only of life, but of wonder, identity, and heritage. The grief over this loss would resonate globally, even among those who have never set foot in the rainforest. Humanity would be reminded that survival is intricately linked to the health of the natural world. Yet within this contemplation of loss lies a lesson in resilience and responsibility. While we cannot bring back vanished species or instantly restore lost rainfall, we can act to protect the Amazon now. Conservation, sustainable management, and global cooperation are ways to preserve what remains and maintain the services the forest provides. Recognizing the Amazon's integral role in shaping climate, biodiversity, and human well-being underscores the urgency of safeguarding it for current and future generations. Perhaps the most striking aspect of imagining a world without the Amazon is realizing how interconnected everything truly is. Trees and rivers in the heart of South America influence hurricanes in the Caribbean, monsoons in Africa, and crop yields in North America. Soil microbes and insects in the rainforest shape nutrient cycles that sustain human food systems. Indigenous knowledge, preserved over millennia, informs medicine and ecology across the globe. The Amazon is not an isolated entity. It is a cornerstone of Earth's living systems. Its disappearance would be a reminder that no part of the planet exists in isolation, and that the fate of one ecosystem resonates across continents. In reflecting on all of these consequences, it becomes clear that the Amazon is much more than a forest. It is a lifeline. Its trees breathe life into the atmosphere. Its rivers sustain continents. And its species form a web of interdependence that connects every living organism. The loss of this vital ecosystem would leave the planet unbalanced, fragile, and diminished in ways both visible and subtle. Humans would face altered climates, diminished resources, and cultural loss, all reminders that our survival is inseparable from the natural world.